Let's get to, you've done a lot of reporting and you've talked about the ISIS terror machine. And that really, it's just a little bit of a preamble. Like I, in some ways, I've become increasingly convinced that in certain areas, some of our that certain types of kind of inflammatory rhetoric, even when they're in fact true, are not necessarily strategically helpful. But I think that in this case of calling it the ICE terror machine, it's not even like skillful, justified hyperbole. It literally is what it is. I mean, it's an organization that is being set upon communities to absolutely disrupt, destroy, communities and deeply enhance human misery. And that's the purpose and the design of what's going on. You've recovered, this in a variety of ways, including a piece that you wrote in your local for Willamette Week earlier in the spring on how certain undocumented people who are waiting for deportation are now being housed instead of in detention facilities, which are bad enough. They're actually being held in a county jail in Oregon, as an example. Can you start to get into that and talk about, like, what does it look like to be on the receiving end of these ICE policies?
I mean, the story that you mentioned was part of a strategy by ICE to break up hunger strikes, which they'd been having in their own facilities, which tend to be, private contractor run. Geo Group is one of the big contractors. And the conditions inside were so miserable for immigration detainees. The food so poor, access to medical care so lacking that they started organizing hunger strikes. And this became such a problem for ICE that they decided to break it up by taking the leaders and moving them to different facilities, some of which had even worse conditions by reputation. And in apparent violation of, at least where it happened in Oregon, the state's sanctuary law. The problem is when the sanctuary statutes get violated, nobody gets punished, right? It's like for all the frothing we've heard from the Trump administration about how these sanctuary policies get in their way, it seems that there's no consequence when local officials violate them and cooperate with ICE or devote resources to help the immigration roundup. As far as what it is, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
As far as what it looks like for people, I use that word terror machine advisedly. I mean, people get picked up, off of the street by guys in an unmarked car when they're walking their kids to the school bus stop. People are looking over their shoulders for their workplaces to get raided, whether they're working on a construction site or in the fields. People are hiding in their homes, with the blinds drawn and afraid to step outside because they're afraid ICE is watching on the street, and often they are. And just those are the tactics I saw last year. There's reports now in the last few weeks that ICE is, tightening the net. I wrote about the sanctuary movement, which is often based around churches. Now ICE is stationing SUVs and agents to watch these churches. They're questioning parishioners as they come and go. The Intercept had a good story about that just a few days ago. And they're targeting immigrants' rights activists, many of whom are immigrants themselves in New York, Colorado, California, and here in the Northwest as well. I had a source who's a really impressive activist, a woman from Mexico City, who's been living here for more than 20 years, who just a few days before Christmas has gotten a deportation order. So, her community is rallying behind her to try to stop it, but who knows?
I think this is something that there's a lot of confusion about. When a city or a state says that they're a sanctuary city or state, and look, I don't entirely discount some of this, but I mean, there's value in, there's value in Jerry Brown or Bill de Blasio or whoever saying, we don't support this, at least rhetorically and instinctually policy-wise, we're opposed to terrorizing immigrants, and we've supported policies, at least like here in New York City, of IDs for undocumented people as an example, so they can access certain vital government services and have some basic labor protections. That's all well and good. But it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, and then we'll move to the second part, which is the sort of churches and social action piece. But from a policy perspective, like on one hand, the kind of resistance-osphere maybe overreads what that means from a policy perspective when California as a state or Portland as a city says it's a sanctuary, a place of sanctuary. What does that actually mean? They might be overinflating it. Then on the other hand, I mean, the administration, as you just said, while on one hand it doesn't appear to actually interfere that much with ICE's ability to terrorize these communities, you have people like Jeff Sessions the other day actually even floating the idea of arresting local officials who, promote sanctuary. And that's, on top of threatening.
Did Sessions say that too? Did Sessions say that too? I know the ICE director, Thomas Homan, had said that on Fox.
I believe Sessions floated that as well, or somebody from the Justice Department, but we can double check that.
That's very disturbing, because if they're repeating it, I mean, it shows that they're serious about it. I mean, the fact that the ICE director, Thomas Homan, even said that on TV should be a scandal. I mean, we were talking in the first part of the segment about, the shutdown, what the Democrats maybe should be doing and aren't doing. I mean, how about dragging that guy in front of Congress and asking him what the hell he's talking about, arresting local politicians?
Right.
That enforce sanctuary laws. I mean, that is really scary territory. And in the context of the kind of stories that we're seeing every day, every week, where somebody who's been in the country for 40 years never committed a crime, now those people are getting rounded up in very well-publicized arrests. These arrests are happening in such a way they want people to see them. ICE can make people disappear, and they do all the time without any publicity. But we're hearing about these arrests. We're hearing about, they seem nonsensical, and then we see the families crying on television. I mean, these are designed to create an effect.
Well, before we do that, just really quick, I mean, what does it mean when a place says it's a sanctuary? Does it just basically mean that we are not going to, local police are not directed to ask the types of questions that could lead somebody to expose themselves as being undocumented? Is that essentially what it means?
You know what it means? It means that the middle-class voting public, white voting public, gets to feel good that they're a sanctuary jurisdiction. It means that some local, city, county officials maybe stand up at a podium with some immigrants' rights activists, and maybe, the sheriff or the chief of police who answers to the council, and they declare, we're a sanctuary jurisdiction. They sign a piece of paper that says we're not going to devote any resources to rounding people up, and we'll refuse requests. And then what happens is, down at the county jail, the jailer, or the guy that's booking people in, gets his daily visit from an ICE agent who says, hey, got any names for me today? Or can you run this for me? Or what's new? And then they pass him the information anyway. Now, that's what happened here in Portland. I know it happens in other cities too. So what happens when that kind of conduct is revealed? Well, in our state, it's actually a crime for a public official to cooperate with ICE, a public employee. It's considered a misapplication of state resources, and it's a crime. It could be prosecuted. And I ask, prosecutors, I ask lawyers, I ask politicians, how about enforcing this law? Has anybody ever tried to enforce it? No. I mean, it's too much of a shitstorm. Can you imagine if the prosecutor starts bringing charges against, local police, local sheriff's deputies for breaking the sanctuary law? Their unions are going to get Their unions are going to get right behind them and say, no, their job is to cooperate with law enforcement. How can this be? Huge clusterfuck. I mean, so it hasn't happened. I think it should happen. I think these laws, if a sanctuary jurisdiction means anything, they should enforce it. So, a short answer to your question is it doesn't mean much.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos